Welcome to the LifeScience Coach, your ultimate destination for mastering research methodology in a simple, practical, and engaging way. If you're passionate about science, education, and research, you're in the right place. So don't forget to like thumbs up sign, share outbox tray, and subscribe bell to the LifeScience Coach.
Every great discovery, every successful research study begins with a clear plan, and that plan is known as research methodology. It is the foundation that guides the entire research process, helping researchers decide how data will be collected, analyzed, and interpreted to achieve meaningful and reliable results. In simple words, research methodology is the roadmap of research, a strategy that ensures the study moves in the right direction with accuracy and purpose. A strong methodology must be compatible with the preliminary data analysis plan and should be carefully designed so that the objectives and research questions can be achieved effectively within the available time, resources, and access. This not only improves the quality of research, but also makes the study practical, organized, and trustworthy. Designing a research methodology mainly involves three important components. First, selecting the overall research method, whether the study follows a qualitative approach, a quantitative approach, or a combination of both, depending on the nature of the research problem. Second, choosing the most suitable data collection methods such as surveys, interviews, observations, questionnaires, or experiments to gather accurate and relevant information. And third, designing the sampling strategy, which helps researchers decide who or what will be included in the study so that the findings truly represent the larger population. Together, these components create a strong structure for conducting effective research. In conclusion, research methodology is much more than just a procedure. It is the backbone of every successful research study. It provides direction, maintains scientific accuracy, and ensures that the research objectives are achieved systematically and efficiently. A well-designed methodology ultimately leads to reliable findings, meaningful conclusions, and impactful discoveries. Research methods are broadly classified into three major categories: quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods. Each method plays an important role in helping researchers understand problems, collect information, and arrive at meaningful conclusions. First, quantitative research focuses on numbers, measurements, and statistical analysis. It is used to measure the prevalence of issues, verify hypotheses, and establish relationships between variables. This method usually involves large sample sizes, structured data collection techniques such as surveys and experiments, and follows a deductive approach where theories are tested using measurable evidence. On the other hand, qualitative research focuses on understanding experiences, opinions, behaviors, and deeper meanings. Instead of measuring data numerically, it explores themes, ideas, and human perspectives to develop theories and gain insights. Qualitative studies often use smaller sample sizes, semi-structured interviews, discussions, observations, and an inductive approach where patterns and concepts emerge from the collected data. Finally, mixed methods research combines the strengths of both quantitative and qualitative approaches. It allows researchers to collect, analyze, and integrate both numerical data and descriptive information within the same study. By using both methods together, researchers can gain a more complete, accurate, and balanced understanding of the research problem. In conclusion, selecting the right research method depends on the objectives of the study, the type of data required, and the overall research design. A well-chosen research method strengthens the quality, reliability, and impact of research findings. Research methods can also be understood through two important approaches of analysis: deductive analysis and inductive analysis. These approaches help researchers decide how knowledge is developed, tested, and interpreted during a study. Deductive analysis, commonly associated with quantitative research, begins with an existing theory or hypothesis. In this approach, theory becomes the starting point. Researchers first define a hypothesis and identify the key variables involved. Based on these variables, research questions are framed and data is collected using structured methods such as surveys, experiments, and statistical analysis. The collected data is then analyzed to determine whether the hypothesis is supported or rejected. In simple words, deductive research moves from general theory to specific conclusions. It focuses on testing ideas using measurable evidence and logical reasoning. On the other hand, inductive analysis, which is mainly linked with qualitative research, works in the opposite direction. Here, theory is the endpoint rather than the beginning. Researchers start by exploring observations, experiences, and real-world information using semi-structured methods like interviews, discussions, and observations.
The collected data is carefully analyzed to identify themes, patterns, and categories. From these patterns, broader explanations, theories, or hypotheses gradually emerge. In simple terms, inductive research moves from specific observations to broader theories. It helps researchers discover new insights, meanings, and perspectives directly from the data itself. Both deductive and inductive approaches are valuable in research, and the choice between them depends on the objectives of the study, the type of data required, and the nature of the research problem. Together, these approaches provide researchers with powerful ways to understand, explain, and explore the world around us. Selecting the right research method is one of the most important decisions in any research study. The choice of method directly influences the quality, reliability, and success of the research findings. Therefore, researchers must carefully evaluate several important factors before choosing one method over another. The first factor is the overall applicability of the method to meet the research objectives. The selected method should align with the aims of the study and help answer the research questions effectively. Another major consideration is time. Researchers must think about deadlines, planning schedules, and important decision-making milestones while selecting an appropriate method. Some research approaches may require long periods of data collection and analysis, while others may be completed within a shorter duration. Resources available also play a critical role in the selection process. These resources may include material resources such as equipment, tools, and technology, financial resources required to conduct the study, and human resources, including skilled researchers, assistants, or participants involved in the project. In addition to this, researchers must consider access to the population of interest. The chosen method should be practical enough to reach the target participants and collect the required information efficiently and ethically. Ultimately, selecting the right research method requires balancing objectives, time, resources, and accessibility. A carefully chosen method strengthens the entire research process and helps produce accurate, meaningful, and impactful results. Quantitative and qualitative research are often considered different, but in reality, the distinction is not always completely clear. Sometimes, the same research methods can be used in both approaches depending on the purpose of the study. For example, individual and household surveys are commonly used in quantitative research because they collect numerical data from large groups of people. However, these surveys can also be used in qualitative studies when researchers want to understand detailed opinions or experiences from a smaller group. Similarly, key informant interviews and community discussions are usually linked with qualitative research because they involve open conversations and detailed responses. But in some cases, they may also support quantitative research when researchers need useful information quickly and cannot collect data from a very large sample. Another important method is focus group discussion. This is mainly a qualitative research method where a group of people discuss a topic together using semi-structured questions. Researchers study these discussions to understand ideas, opinions, emotions, and experiences. Sometimes, researchers also analyze how frequently certain words or themes appear in the discussion, which introduces a small quantitative element into the analysis. This shows that quantitative and qualitative research methods can overlap and work together. Ultimately, the choice of method depends on the research objectives, the type of information needed, and the best way to understand the research problem. Quantitative and qualitative research can be differentiated based on three important criteria: the type of data collection, the type of analysis, and the sampling strategy used in the study. First, the type of data collection. Quantitative research mainly uses structured and close-ended tools such as questionnaires, surveys, and tests where responses are fixed and measurable. In contrast, qualitative research uses semi-structured methods like interviews and discussions, where participants can express their thoughts and experiences in detail. Second, the type of analysis. Quantitative research focuses on measuring data, counting results, identifying patterns, and testing hypotheses using deductive analysis and statistical methods. On the other hand, qualitative research is more exploratory in nature. It focuses on understanding ideas, opinions, behaviors, and experiences using inductive analysis to identify themes and meanings from the collected data. Finally, the sampling strategy. Quantitative research can use both probability and non-probability sampling methods, allowing researchers to generalize findings to a larger population. However, qualitative research usually uses non-probability sampling, where smaller groups are selected intentionally, and therefore the findings may not always represent the entire population. In simple words, quantitative research answers questions using numbers and measurements, while qualitative research helps us understand human experiences and deeper meanings. Both methods are important, and researchers choose them depending on the objectives and needs of the study. Research methods can be classified into different types depending on how data is collected, analyzed, and used in a study. One common type is quantitative research using probability sampling or census methods. In this approach, researchers collect structured and close-ended data from a large number of people. The data is analyzed using quantitative techniques and statistical methods. Since large and representative samples are used, the findings can often be generalized to the wider population. This method is useful when researchers want to measure prevalence, test hypotheses, study relationships between variables, or identify factors that influence a specific outcome. Another type is quantitative research using non-probability sampling. Here, researchers still use structured and close-ended data collection methods, but the sample may not fully represent the entire population. The sample size can be small or large depending on the situation. This method is usually selected when there are limitations such as lack of time, resources, or access to a larger population. Although the findings may not be fully generalizable, they can still provide useful and indicative insights about the research problem. In simple terms, probability sampling helps researchers make stronger conclusions about a population, while non-probability sampling is more practical when resources and access are limited. Choosing the right method depends on the objectives of the study and the conditions under which the research is being conducted. Another important type of research method is qualitative research. This method mainly uses semi-structured data collection techniques such as interviews, discussions, and observations. Unlike quantitative research, qualitative research usually works with smaller sample sizes and non-probability sampling methods. The main goal here is not to measure numbers or test hypotheses, but to deeply understand people's experiences, opinions, behaviors, and perspectives. Qualitative research is especially useful when researchers have limited prior knowledge about a topic and want to explore it in detail. Through inductive analysis, researchers identify patterns, themes, and meanings from the collected information, which may later help in developing theories or explanations about the situation being studied. Another important approach is mixed methods research. As the name suggests, this method combines both quantitative and qualitative research approaches in a single study. Researchers collect and analyze both numerical data and descriptive information together to gain a deeper and more complete understanding of the research problem. Mixed methods are especially useful when using only one method is not enough to fully understand the issue being studied. By combining the strengths of both approaches, researchers can improve the accuracy, depth, and overall quality of the research findings. In simple words, qualitative research helps us understand why and how, while mixed methods combine both numbers and experiences to provide a broader and more comprehensive picture of the research problem. Quantitative research includes several important approaches that help researchers collect numerical data, analyze relationships, and test scientific ideas. One of the most common approaches is survey research. In this method, researchers collect information from a large group of people using questionnaires, forms, or structured interviews. Survey research is mainly used to understand opinions, behaviors, trends, or characteristics of a population. Another important approach is descriptive research. This type of research focuses on describing a situation, group, or phenomenon as it exists. It helps researchers answer questions like what, when, and where without changing or influencing the environment being studied. The third approach is correlational research. This method examines the relationship between two or more variables to understand whether they are connected. For example, a researcher may study whether study hours are related to student performance. However, correlational research only shows relationships and does not prove cause and effect. Another category is quasi-experimental research. In this approach, researchers try to study cause and effect relationships, but they may not have full control over all variables or participant groups. It is often used in real-life situations where conducting a true experiment is difficult. Finally, experimental research is considered one of the strongest quantitative approaches. In this method, researchers carefully control variables and conditions to test hypotheses and identify cause and effect relationships accurately. Experiments are commonly used in science, psychology, medicine, and education. In simple words, each quantitative research approach has a different purpose, and researchers choose the most suitable one depending on the objectives and requirements of the study. Survey research is one of the most widely used methods in quantitative research. It involves collecting information from a group or sample of individuals by asking them a set of questions. These questions may be asked through questionnaires, online forms, interviews, or feedback forms. The responses collected from participants help researchers understand opinions, behaviors, attitudes, experiences, or characteristics of a larger population. Survey research is especially popular in social research because it is versatile, efficient, and easy to conduct on a large scale. It allows researchers to collect data from many people within a short period of time and at a lower cost compared to other methods. Another major advantage of survey research is generalizability, where findings from a selected sample can often represent the wider population when proper sampling methods are used. In simple words, survey research helps researchers gather organized information quickly and systematically to better understand people and society. Descriptive research is a type of research design that focuses on collecting information to clearly and systematically describe a phenomenon, situation, group, or population. The main purpose of descriptive research is to explain what is happening, when it happens, where it happens, and how it happens. Unlike experimental research, descriptive research does not try to identify cause and effect relationships or answer the question, why. Instead, it provides a detailed picture of the subject being studied. Researchers use descriptive research to gather organized information through methods such as surveys, observations, and reports. This approach is widely used in fields like education, social sciences, business, healthcare, and market research to understand behaviors, trends, characteristics, and conditions. In simple words, descriptive research helps researchers observe and describe situations accurately without changing or influencing them. It gives a clear understanding of real-world conditions and helps build a strong foundation for further research and analysis. Correlational research is a type of research design used to study the relationship between two or more variables without changing or controlling them. In this method, researchers simply observe and analyze how variables are connected in real-life situations. A correlation shows both the strength and the direction of a relationship between variables. The relationship can be positive or negative. A positive correlation means that when one variable increases, the other also increases. For example, the more hours students study, the higher their marks may become. A negative correlation means that when one variable increases, the other decreases. For instance, as stress levels increase, sleep quality may decrease. It is important to understand that correlational research only identifies relationships between variables. It does not prove cause and effect. Researchers use this method to identify patterns, trends, and associations that may help in further studies or decision-making. In simple words, correlational research helps us understand whether and how different factors are connected to each other in the real world. Quasi-experimental research is a type of research design that aims to study cause and effect relationships between variables, similar to a true experiment. In this method, researchers try to understand how one factor influences another. However, unlike true experimental research, quasi-experimental research does not use random assignment of participants into groups. Instead, participants are grouped based on existing conditions or non-random criteria. This method is commonly used in real-life situations where conducting a completely controlled experiment is difficult or not practical. For example, a hospital may introduce a new digital order entry system and then compare the number of medication-related errors before and after the new system was introduced. In this case, researchers are studying the impact of an intervention, but they are not randomly assigning people into groups. Quasi-experimental research is widely used in education, healthcare, psychology, and social sciences because it allows researchers to study practical problems in natural settings. In simple words, quasi-experimental research helps researchers examine possible cause and effect relationships in real-world environments where full experimental control is not possible. Experimental research is a scientific research method used to study cause and effect relationships between variables. In this type of research, researchers carefully design procedures and control conditions to understand how one variable affects another. Usually, one set of variables is kept constant, while another variable is changed or manipulated to observe its impact. This helps researchers identify accurate and reliable results using a scientific approach. Experimental research is considered one of the strongest research methods because it allows greater control over the study environment. There are different types of experimental designs used in research. Pre-experimental designs are the simplest forms and are often used for basic observations or preliminary studies. True experimental designs are more advanced and involve random assignment of participants into groups, making the results highly reliable. Quasi-experimental designs are similar to true experiments but do not use complete random assignment, making them useful in real-world situations where full control is difficult. Another category is statistical experimental design, where researchers use statistical techniques such as time series analysis to study patterns and changes over time. Experimental research is widely used in science, medicine, psychology, education, and social sciences to test hypotheses and discover cause and effect relationships. In simple words, experimental research helps researchers scientifically test ideas, compare outcomes, and understand how different factors influence results. To better understand the difference between a true experiment and a quasi-experiment, let us consider an example from psychology research. Imagine researchers want to study the effect of a new psychological therapy on patients suffering from depression. In a true experimental design, researchers would randomly divide patients into two groups. One group would receive the new therapy, while the other group, called the control group, would continue with the standard treatment. After a few months, researchers would compare the results to see whether the new therapy works better than the existing treatment. Because participants are randomly assigned, true experiments provide highly reliable results and stronger evidence for cause and effect relationships. However, in real-life situations, conducting a true experiment is not always possible. For ethical or practical reasons, hospitals or clinics may not allow researchers to randomly assign patients to treatments. In such cases, researchers use a quasi-experimental design. Here, instead of randomly creating groups, researchers study already existing groups. For example, some therapists in a clinic may choose to use the new therapy, while others continue using the traditional method. Researchers then compare the progress of patients in these naturally formed groups. Although the groups are not randomly assigned, careful analysis can still help researchers understand whether the treatment caused any significant changes. In simple words, true experiments use random assignment and provide stronger control, while quasi-experiments are more practical for studying real-world situations where full experimental control is not possible. Qualitative research methods are used to understand people's experiences, opinions, behaviors, emotions, and perspectives in depth. Unlike quantitative research, qualitative research focuses more on meanings and understanding rather than numbers and statistics. There are several important methods used in qualitative research. One common method is observation, where researchers carefully watch people, situations, or behaviors in natural settings to understand what is happening. Another method is one-on-one interviews, where researchers directly interact with participants and ask open-ended questions to gather detailed information and personal experiences. Focus group discussions involve a small group of people discussing a topic together, helping researchers understand different opinions and viewpoints. Another important approach is case study research, where a single person, group, organization, or event is studied in detail to gain deep insights into a specific issue or situation. Ethnography is a method where researchers spend time within a community or culture to understand people's lifestyles, traditions, and social interactions. Grounded theory focuses on developing new theories based on the information collected from participants and observations. Finally, phenomenology studies people's lived experiences and aims to understand how individuals experience and interpret certain events or situations in their lives. In simple words, qualitative research methods help researchers explore the human side of research by understanding thoughts, experiences, behaviors, and meanings in a detailed and meaningful way. Observation is one of the oldest and most important qualitative research methods used to collect information by carefully watching people, situations, and behaviors. In this method, researchers use their senses such as sight, hearing, touch, smell, and sometimes even taste to understand what is happening in a natural setting. Unlike quantitative research, observation focuses more on qualities, characteristics, actions, and interactions rather than numbers or statistics. In qualitative observation, researchers closely study how people behave and interact in specific situations. Instead of directly asking questions, the researcher gathers information by watching and recording behaviors, activities, and responses. This method helps researchers understand real-life situations more naturally because people often behave differently when they are answering formal questions. For example, a researcher studying children's behavior in a school may observe how students interact with each other, how they share food, which activities they enjoy the most, or how they behave inside and outside the classroom. By carefully recording these observations, researchers can gain deeper insights into human behavior and social interactions. In simple words, the observation method helps researchers understand people and situations by watching what they do in real-life environments rather than only relying on what they say. One-on-one interviews are one of the most common methods used in qualitative research. In this method, the researcher has a direct conversation with a participant to collect detailed and in-depth information about a specific topic. These interviews usually involve open-ended questions, allowing participants to freely express their thoughts, opinions, experiences, and feelings. The main purpose of one-on-one interviews is to gather rich qualitative data that cannot always be understood through numbers or surveys alone. During the interview, researchers ask pre-planned questions and carefully listen to the participants' responses to better understand the research problem. Interviews can be conducted face-to-face, through phone calls, video calls, or even through email communication. One advantage of this method is that researchers can ask follow-up questions and explore topics in greater depth. However, one limitation is that some participants may feel uncomfortable sharing completely honest answers, especially on sensitive topics. For example, a business may conduct one-on-one interviews with customers to understand their opinions about a product before expanding it to a larger market. In simple words, one-on-one interviews help researchers gain deeper insights by directly listening to people's personal experiences, ideas, and perspectives. Focus groups are an important qualitative research method used to collect detailed opinions, ideas, and experiences through group discussions. In this method, a small group of around 6 to 12 participants discusses a particular topic under the guidance of a moderator or researcher. The moderator asks pre-planned open-ended questions to encourage participants to interact, share their thoughts, and express their feelings freely. Unlike simple yes or no questions, focus group discussions use questions such as how, what, and why to create deeper conversations and meaningful engagement among participants. One major advantage of focus groups is that participants can respond to each other's opinions, helping researchers understand different perspectives and group behavior more effectively. This method is widely used in market research, education, psychology, and social sciences to gather rich qualitative information. For example, a software company may conduct a focus group discussion before launching a new product feature. The selected participants from the target audience discuss their opinions, reactions, likes, and concerns about the new feature, helping the company make better decisions before introducing the product to the market. In simple words, focus groups help researchers understand people's opinions and experiences through interactive group conversations and discussions. Case study research is an important qualitative research method that involves a detailed and in-depth study of a particular person, group, event, organization, or situation. The main purpose of a case study is to gain complete understanding and detailed knowledge about a specific subject. In this method, Researchers collect information from multiple sources such as interviews, observations, documents, and reports to develop a deeper understanding of the issue being studied. Case study research is widely used in fields such as social sciences, business, law, healthcare, and education because it helps researchers explore real-life situations in detail. This method is especially useful when researchers want to understand how and why something happens in a particular context. Many businesses also use case studies to demonstrate how their products or services solve real-world problems for customers. For example, when a company launches a new product, it may create a case study showing how the product helped a customer overcome a specific challenge. This helps other customers better understand the effectiveness and practical value of the product or service. In simple words, case study research helps researchers deeply examine a specific subject or situation to gain meaningful insights and real-world understanding. Ethnography is a qualitative research method that focuses on studying people, their culture, traditions, lifestyles, and daily behavior in their natural environment. In this method, the researcher spends a long period of time with the group or community being studied and acts as both an observer and participant. By living closely with the people, researchers gain first-hand experience about their culture, beliefs, goals, challenges, and social interactions. Ethnography is commonly used in anthropology and social sciences to study communities, societies, and cultural practices in detail. This method helps researchers understand how people live, think, communicate, and interact within their environment. Since the researcher becomes directly involved in the community, ethnographic research provides deep and realistic insights that may not be possible through surveys or interviews alone. However, ethnography is usually time-consuming because the research may continue for months or even years. Researchers may also face challenges such as geographical barriers and adapting to unfamiliar environments while collecting data. For example, a researcher may travel to a remote village and live with the local community for a long period to study their traditions, lifestyle, language, and cultural practices. In simple words, ethnography helps researchers deeply understand people and cultures by observing and experiencing their real-life environment directly. Grounded theory is an important qualitative research method used to develop new theories and explanations based on collected data. Instead of starting with an existing theory, researchers gather information first and then carefully analyze it to discover patterns, reasons, and deeper meanings behind a situation or behavior. The main goal of grounded theory is to understand why something happens the way it does. Researchers collect data using methods such as observations, interviews, literature reviews, and document analysis. As the data is analyzed, new ideas and theories gradually emerge directly from the information collected. Grounded theory is widely used in business, social sciences, healthcare, and education to understand human behavior, decision-making, and real-world problems. For example, companies may use grounded theory research to understand why customers prefer a particular product or why employees lack motivation at work. By identifying the root causes of a problem, organizations can develop better solutions and improve customer satisfaction or employee performance. In simple words, grounded theory helps researchers create new theories by studying real-life data and understanding the deeper reasons behind people's actions, experiences, and behaviors. Phenomenology is a qualitative research method that focuses on understanding people's personal experiences, emotions, and feelings about a particular event or situation. The main aim of phenomenology is to explore how individuals experience something and what meaning they give to that experience. In this method, researchers usually conduct detailed interviews with people who have gone through a specific event or situation. By comparing their experiences, researchers identify common patterns, thoughts, and feelings shared among participants. This helps researchers better understand how people perceive and interpret real-life experiences. Although interviews are the primary method used in phenomenological research, other techniques such as observations, questionnaires, and discussions may also be used to support the findings and improve the credibility of the data. Phenomenology is commonly applied in fields such as psychology, education, philosophy, healthcare, and social sciences to study human experiences in depth. For example, a researcher may study why students prefer online learning by interviewing students and understanding their experiences, opinions, and reasons behind choosing online courses. In simple words, phenomenology helps researchers understand how people feel, think, and experience events in their everyday lives. In research studies, the terms participants and respondents are often used to describe the people involved in the research process. These subjects may be individuals or groups on whom a study, intervention, or process is conducted. Although both terms are related to data collection, they are commonly used in different types of research. Participants are usually associated with qualitative research methods such as interviews, observations, and focus group discussions. They actively take part in the research by sharing their experiences, opinions, thoughts, and feelings in detail. Researchers interact closely with participants to collect deeper and more meaningful information. On the other hand, respondents are more commonly linked with quantitative research. Respondents mainly answer questionnaires, surveys, or structured forms by selecting or providing responses to specific questions. Their answers are usually used to collect measurable and numerical data for analysis. In simple words, participants actively engage in discussions and qualitative studies, while respondents mainly provide answers in surveys and quantitative research. Both play an important role in helping researchers collect accurate and valuable information for their studies. Respondents or participants are the people who take part in a research study. These are the individuals who have been invited to participate in the research and have actually contributed to the study by sharing information, answering questions, giving opinions, or participating in activities related to the research topic. They play a very important role because the quality and accuracy of research findings depend greatly on the information they provide. In qualitative research, participants usually share detailed experiences, thoughts, and feelings through interviews, discussions, or observations. In quantitative research, respondents mainly answer surveys or questionnaires that help researchers collect numerical data. In simple words, respondents and participants are the people from whom researchers gather information to better understand a problem, situation, behavior, or phenomenon being studied. Sampling method refers to the process of selecting a small group of people, called a sample, from a larger population for research. The selected sample should represent the whole group so that the researcher can draw accurate conclusions. There are two main types of sampling methods. First is probability sampling. In this method, participants are selected randomly, meaning everyone in the population has an equal chance of being chosen. This method helps researchers make strong and reliable conclusions about the entire population. For example, selecting students randomly from all classes in a college. Second is non-probability sampling. In this method, participants are selected based on convenience, availability, or specific criteria instead of random selection. It is easier and faster but may not fully represent the whole population. For example, surveying only nearby students because they are easily available. In simple words, probability sampling is more scientific and accurate, while non-probability sampling is easier and quicker to conduct. Population and sample are two important concepts in research. A population means the entire group that the researcher wants to study or draw conclusions about. For example, all students in a college. A sample is a smaller group selected from that population to collect data from. For example, selecting 100 students from the college for a survey. Researchers usually study a sample instead of the whole population because it saves time, money, and effort. In simple words, population means the whole group, while sample means a small part of that group used for research. A sampling frame is the complete list from which researchers choose their sample. It should include all members of the target population. Example: if a researcher studies employees in a company, the employee database or HR list becomes the sampling frame. Sample size. Sample size means the number of people selected for the study. The size depends on population size, type of research, time, and resources available. A larger sample usually gives more accurate results. Probability sampling method. In probability sampling, every person in the population has an equal chance of being selected. It is mainly used in quantitative research because it gives more reliable and representative results. Main types: simple random sampling, systematic sampling, stratified sampling, cluster sampling, simple random sampling. In this method, every member has an equal chance of selection. How it works. Researchers select participants randomly using methods like lottery or random number generators. Example: from 1,000 students, selecting 100 students randomly. Systematic sampling. In this method, researchers select participants at regular intervals. How it works. After choosing a starting point, every nth person is selected. Example: choosing every 10th student from a class list. Stratified sampling. In stratified sampling, the population is divided into groups called strata based on characteristics like age, gender, or department. Then samples are taken from each group. Example: selecting students equally from science, commerce, and arts departments. Cluster sampling. In cluster sampling, the population is divided into clusters, and entire groups are selected randomly. Example: choosing 2 schools randomly from a city and surveying all students in those schools. Stratified sampling. In stratified sampling, the population is divided into smaller groups called strata based on common characteristics like age, gender, department, or income. Then, samples are taken from each group. Why is it used? It ensures that every subgroup is properly represented in the research. Example: a company has 800 female employees, 200 male employees. To make the sample representative, the researcher selects 80 women, 20 men. This keeps the same proportion as the population. Cluster sampling. In cluster sampling, the population is divided into groups called clusters. Instead of selecting individuals from every group, the researcher randomly selects entire groups. Why is it used? It is useful when the population is very large or spread across different places. Example: a company has offices in 10 cities. Instead of visiting all offices, the researcher randomly selects 3 offices and studies employees there. In non-probability sampling, individuals are selected using non-random methods. Not everyone in the population has an equal chance of being selected. Features: easy and inexpensive, faster data collection, higher risk of bias, mostly used in qualitative research. Types of non-probability sampling. 1. Convenience sampling. People who are easiest to access are selected. Example: a researcher surveys students from their own class because they are easily available. Advantage: quick and cheap. Disadvantage: may not represent the whole population. 2. Purposive sampling. Participants are selected based on the researcher's judgment and purpose of the study. Example: a researcher studying depression selects only psychologists and patients with depression. Advantage: gives detailed and relevant information. Disadvantage: researcher bias may occur. Voluntary response sampling. Voluntary response sampling is a type of non-probability sampling where people choose to participate on their own. Features: participants volunteer themselves. Common in online surveys and public polls. Easy to conduct, can create self-selection bias. Example: a university sends an online survey to all students. Only students interested in the topic respond. Advantage: quick and low cost. Disadvantage: responses may be biased because people with strong opinions participate more. Purposive sampling, judgment sampling. Purposive sampling is a non-probability sampling method where the researcher selects participants based on their knowledge, expertise, or relevance to the study. Features: participants are selected intentionally, mostly used in qualitative research, focuses on specific groups. Example: a researcher studying disabled students selects students with different support needs to gather detailed information. Advantage: provides rich and detailed data. Disadvantage: researcher bias may affect selection. Snowball sampling is a type of non-probability sampling used when the target population is difficult to find or contact. In this method, existing participants help the researcher recruit more participants. Why is it called snowball? The sample size keeps growing like a snowball rolling downhill. Features of snowball sampling: used for hard-to-reach populations. Participants refer other participants. Common in qualitative research. Risk of sampling bias. Example: a researcher is studying homelessness in a city. Since there is no official list of homeless people, the researcher contacts one homeless person. That person introduces the researcher to others. The sample continues to grow through referrals. Data collection methods are divided into primary sources and secondary sources. 1. Primary sources. Primary data is collected directly by the researcher for the first time. Types of primary data collection. A. Observation. The researcher watches and records behavior or events. Types. Participant observation. Researcher becomes part of the group being studied. Example: a researcher lives in a village to study its culture. Non-participant observation. Researcher observes without participating. Example: watching students' classroom behavior from outside. B. Interviewing. The researcher asks questions directly to participants. Types: structured interview, fixed and pre-planned questions. Example: survey interview with the same questions for everyone. Unstructured interview, open and flexible conversation. Example: casual discussion to understand feelings or experiences. C. Questionnaire. Participants answer written questions. Types: mailed questionnaire, sent through mail or online forms. Example: Google Form survey sent to students. Collective questionnaire, given to a group together. Example: a teacher distributes questionnaires to an entire class. 2. Secondary sources. Secondary data is already collected by others and used by the researcher. Sources of secondary data: government publications, earlier research studies, census reports, personal records, client history, service records. Example: using census data from the government website for population research. A research instrument is a tool used by researchers to collect data, measure information, analyze research findings. It helps the researcher gather accurate information related to the study. Common research instruments: questionnaires, interviews, surveys, tests, observation checklists. Purpose of a research instrument: to collect reliable data to measure variables in research, to support analysis and conclusions. Areas where research instruments are used: health sciences, social sciences, education, business research. Examples of research instruments: research method, research instrument, interview method, interview schedule / question, survey method, questionnaire, observation method, observation checklist, experimental method, test or measuring scale. Example: if a researcher wants to study student stress levels. Method: survey instrument, questionnaire. If a researcher studies classroom behavior. Method: observation instrument, observation checklist. Characteristics of a good research instrument. A good research instrument should have the following qualities. Validity: measures exactly what it is supposed to measure. Reliability: produces consistent and dependable results, based on a conceptual framework built according to the relationship between research variables. Relevant to the research topic: collects suitable and meaningful data for the study. Able to answer research questions or test hypotheses, helps achieve the objectives of the research. Free from bias: should not favor or influence participants unfairly. Appropriate for context and culture, suitable for the study environment and participants. Clear instructions, easy to understand and use by respondents and researchers. Types of research instruments. 1. Interviews. Interviews involve verbal questioning by the researcher to obtain responses from participants. Types of interview: structured interview, fixed and standardized questions for all participants. Unstructured interview, flexible questions, interviewer can change wording and sequence. Non-directive interview, open-ended and informal discussion. Focused interview, concentrates on personal experiences and detailed responses. Focus group interview, discussion with a group about a particular topic. Point 2. Observation. Observation means watching and recording behavior or events. Types of observation: structured observation, conducted using a planned and standardized method. Naturalistic observation, observing participants in their natural environment. Participant observation, researcher becomes part of the group being studied. Point 3. Surveys. Surveys collect information by asking questions to respondents. Types of survey questions: free answer, open-ended. Participants answer in their own words. Guided response type, includes multiple choice or recall-based questions. Easy summary table instrument type. Purpose: example interview, collect verbal responses. Face-to-face interview, observation, watch behavior / actions. Classroom observation, survey, collect opinions / data. Questionnaire form,